off this Atlanta Black Pride month. I shouldn't say just Pride Month, really, not Atlanta Black Pride Month, but Pride Month. This is one of the first times that we have filled our calendar full of wonderful events for the month of June. To climax the end of the month, we'll be celebrating a Stonewall celebration. And we're actually going to hopefully be in New York via live Zoom to talk to some people in New York. But we're welcoming all of you here to be with us on this very special kickoff celebration for Pride Month. And what better way than to have our leaders from Atlanta join us on this call, as well as our leaders in other parts of the country. I'll let George take over and introduce our panel and give you a brief background on each.
Thank you, Ricky. Our panelists tonight, Tracy McDaniel is a trans human rights advocate and published author. Tracy McDaniel is motivated by a strong desire to ensure that all trans and gender nonconforming people also receive equity, justice, civil, and human rights protections. Tracy has previously served on the Atlanta Police Department's LGBTQI advisory boards and a working group on prostitution. She is also on the Trans Housing Atlanta Program's Board of Directors, Center for Civil and Human Rights, TLGB Advisory Board, and Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms' TLGBTQI Advisory Council, serving in a second term. Tori Cooper is a health and equity advocate, a community organizer, educator, a published author, and leader in the transgender and HIV communities with more than 30 years of experience at all levels of HIV service, from volunteer roles to her service as executive director and founder of Advocates for Better Care Atlanta, LLC. She now serves as the Human Rights Campaign Director of Community Engagement for the Transgender Justice Initiative. Malcolm Reed is the Director of Programs for Thrive SS, which stands for Transforming HIV Resentments into Victories Everlasting. Thrive's mission is to achieve health equity for Black gay men living with HIV. Malcolm started as a volunteer back in 2016, and he co-founded the PASAN, the Political and Social Action Network, in 2017. He created what is now the Silver Lining Project, a program and intervention to support and enhance the lives of Black gay men over the age of 50 living with HIV. Both of these programs exist under the Thrive SS umbrella. Pamela Stewart currently serves as chair of the board of directors of GLAAD, a board member of 3DE by Junior Achievement, board member of Coca-Cola's Global Women's Leadership Council, and co-chair of one of Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms' advisory councils. Jay Meggs is the CEO and founder of Trans Gentlemen of Excellence. Jay developed Trans Gentlemen of Excellence Incorporated as a national all-trans men of color organization based out of Atlanta. Mr. Eric King is appointed as Department LGBT liaison for, he is the first openly gay officer serving in the role of liaison. While serving in this current position, he wants to increase the level of communication and continue to build the partnership between the LGBT community and the Atlanta Police Department. And finally, Jermaine Nakia Lee. He is a songwriter, director, producer, arts educator, and published playwright whose musical For the Love of Harlem and A Walk in My Shoes have enjoyed critical acclaim. He is co-founder of Charlotte Black Pride, South Carolina Black Pride, and Triangle Black Pride, all of which are still in existence. He is also the former education director for On Cue Performing Arts Incorporated. On Cue is Charlotte's first professional African-American repertory theater, and he is founder and director of Poor No More, a grassroots community service organization that serves to empower Charlotte's poor and working poor. Thank each and every one of you. Your curriculum vitae are very impressive, and I know this is going to be a great conversation tonight as we continue to talk about the future state of Black LGBTQ in America. So I want to start off right in the
There,
crux of it.
yay, there we go. There's everybody's lovely face. Yes, yes,
Yes, yes,
yes.
indeed. That's important. That's important to
Yes,
see us
yes. I
all.
was like, please, we need to get our cameras on so I can see everybody, embrace and love on them. I am so happy
Good
to have
evening,
all of them
everybody.
in the room, y'all. So thank you. Love, and kisses and virtual hugs. It's been a while since I've seen the crew. Do you hear me? Well, I've seen Malcolm because he lives down the street from me. So it's always good to have him. But I miss Pam. I miss Jeremy. I miss Tracy. I miss Tori. I miss Eric. Stephanie, welcome. Glad you are here with us this evening. She is one of our sponsors, Cocktails and Conversations. So welcome aboard. So glad to have you on the team. George, good to
Yes.
see you, my brother.
Thank you. Good to be seen and not viewed. I promise you.
Okay.
I promise you that. I
Amen.
promise you that.
Amen. Amen. So kick us off. Let's go.
Well, it is 2021 and a stark contrast in this year as the Biden administration has taken hold of the White House. Stark contrast into what we experienced during the Trump administration. So many positive moves Biden has done in his administration, and just a few, to name a few. In March 31st, President Biden issues Transgender Day of Visibility message. Of course, Trump did not do that. In April, he made sure that the President Biden executive order affirmed that the Supreme Court's decision in Bostock versus Clayton County, the Department of Justice issued a memo determining that Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. However, in Texas, that is now being debated so that people of religious affiliation can bypass that. Congratulations, Texas. Yay, you. But this is all in stark contrast to what was going on during the Trump administration. So we are still moving forward, but there's a lot left to do. I want to start right here. In 2021, we already have 27 transgender and non-confirming, non-binary, non-gender conforming and non-binary people who have been violently murdered. It has not made media mainstream news. Often when they are reported on, they're dead named. And we have a disconnect. What is happening in our Black community that is causing a large number of African-American transgender and non-conforming, gender-conforming people to be murdered? And what can be done in our community to make us safer and to stop dead naming us when we are reported on? I'll start with you. Is Mr. King in the room? I don't see him, but I'd like to start with him.
Unmute yourself, Eric. You can unmute yourself, Eric.
There we go.
Hey, how are you, Mr. King?
Good
Thank you so much.
evening. I'm good.
Oh, did you hear the question?
Sort of, yes. Can you repeat it, please? Sorry.
Okay, no worries. I wanted to find out how we in 2021 at the 27 people gender non-conforming and transgender have been murdered in our communities. Often they're reported on, and when they are, they're dead named. How do we make our communities feel safer? How do we make our police officers respect transgender people in their identities? What is the disconnect that you may see serving your position?
Okay. I don't know the ultimate answer to end it all, but I do know the steps that we are currently doing in the Atlanta Police Department. We do transgender interaction scenarios with our recruits. Also a training around LGBT issues that definitely encompass transgender community and non-binary people. I think Tori has been a part of that before. And so we just try to put as many different scenarios in front of them so that when they are out on the streets, they do make adequate decisions. We just released, I think we will be releasing a video that we just did detailing a traffic stop involving somebody that does identify as transgender. Another thing is that I constantly get calls from other departments about situations that happen with somebody who identifies as transgender or gender nonconforming. And I always talk to them about dead naming and how that is not appropriate. It serves no purpose. And I think my last call was just with Brookhaven, to be exact, about what that means. And so just educating people as much as I can about what I've been taught, and how people want to be respected.
Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term dead naming is when a transgender person has changed their name to fit their identity. And when they are announced, their former name before their transition is called out or reported in the press, which is horrible in a lot of instances. But what we want to talk about in the community right now, dead naming is a major issue. And as we move with these new voting rights and you have to show your identity, a lot of transgender people will be at an impasse because a lot of times their identity might not match what they look like. They may still have their former names. How do we move past that? And I know that we have some human rights advocates on here. So I'd like to hear your take on that and your spin and answer in that.
George, just a quick housekeeping question. So whenever we want to respond to someone, shall we just raise our hand?
I see it there now, and yes, you may.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to add on to what Officer King just said. Credit must be given to APD for having community input, community involvement in developing the standard of operating procedures, which is the Bible, so to speak, for officers and how to interact with trans and gender nonconforming people for APD officers and corrections officers. So there's a blueprint there, and thankfully we live in a city where they see the need and they're making safe spaces for us. So I just wanted to say there's a lot going on with law enforcement. However, we must give the credit where credit is due.
Certainly.
And you mentioned dead naming. I think there are organizations now that are helping trans and gender nonconforming, non-binary people with name changes. We have companies, organizations sponsoring those workshops to assist trans and gender nonconforming people with their name changes. However, not everyone has access to those resources, which is why we must continue to advocate for those whom still have their same gender markers on their birth certificates, driver's licenses, etc. Nobody should be discriminated against regardless of, how they appear in front of you and what it says on paper.
Certainly. Thank you so very much, Ms. Tracy McDaniel, who answered that. Anyone else want to add to that conversation? Anyone? Good. We'll move on. Now, go ahead. I see you raising your hand. Go ahead. I see it now. Tori.
Good evening. So happy to be here. I miss all of you tremendously. I will also add that there's a legal aspect of it as well, that I think when we look at the bigger issue, one of the things, I take notes also, so you'll see me looking down, and I'll try and be as succinct as possible. But this is another reason why all of us, everybody who falls under the rainbow family, really needs to advocate for trans and non-binary rights. And legislation and policy and fight against anti-trans stuff that's going on. Because if there were greater access for trans and non-binary people to have our names changed, if it were an easier process. When people get married, it's easy to change your name if you're cisgender, but simply because you're trans, it is up to the discretion of a judge to decide yay or nay. And also on the Georgia DMV's website, it also says that it's up to the discretion of a clerk to see if they will honor the paperwork that you may bring in with you to recognize a legal name change or gender marker. Another thing that should go along with that, it shouldn't be as difficult as it is to have a person's gender marker change. Just like every person under the queer spectrum's identity is a bit different and the way that they live and express themselves, it's the same for trans folks. And all of us don't choose to have confirming surgery or medical interventions. And so if a person tells you, if I tell you I'm a woman, then I should be able to get a document that reflects that. If I tell you I'm a man, then I should be able to have a document that reflects that. And so ensuring that there are legal, if I tell you I'm neither, there should be a document that protects that reflects that as well. And so there has to be much more advocacy and laws that reflects reality of who people are and who we are under the gender spectrum. And I'd like to add this about the police. Love Officer King. I love police officers, but I also know that there's a lot of room for growth as well. And police officers sometimes will use the excuse, well, the legal name is this. And I remind police officers all the time, when you're looking for a criminal, you use every name that you know that person has. Mm-hmm. However, when it comes, they'll call you Bubba in a news report if that's going to help to catch you.
Yeah.
So they know how to use the chosen names that people know you by in the community. And what happens is when localities, when individual officers, when any guardian of the law or any representative of authority is not addressing a person properly by their name after death. 24 trans and non-binary people already killed so far this year. If they're not properly naming someone, then what they're actually doing is prohibiting or inhibiting the appropriate legal response. They may be prohibiting the community. If you only know me by Tory, but my government is Thomas, and you put Thomas Cooper in a newspaper, my friends are Tracy's not gonna know that's me.
Right, yeah.
He's not gonna know that's me. And so what you're doing is you are actually stopping the progress and make it much more difficult for trans people, even post-mortem, to be respected and acknowledged for who we are.
Certainly, very, very, very good. I want to also stay right there for a second, and I know that a lot of times when transgender people are arrested and often jailed, there is sort of a disconnect in some of the stories that I have read where transgender women have been put in men's prison, and there is not yet, as what I've read, a system in place across the board how that is done correctly to affirm that transgender person's identity. Can anyone speak to any of that? What is happening legislatively?
Hey guys, this is Jermaine. Unfortunately, there's nothing happening legislatively. In Charlotte, this is an issue that many of the community leaders have taken up with our local government and our police department. There are in our community several stories of trans women and trans femme identified individuals being sexually assaulted and physically assaulted, or just emotionally and verbally abused while incarcerated. And the correction officers seem to think that that's somehow a part of their punishment, like it's a part of their it's a natural course of their experience of being incarcerated, and we know that that's not true.
Right.
So some great work needs to be done about that, and to my knowledge, there's certainly nothing on the federal level and nothing on the state level here in North Carolina being done about it. But that's, as it relates to the state of the Black LGBTQ plus community, that's at the top of the list of something that has to be addressed and has to be addressed immediately. But I think the root of addressing that is what I think what the heart of your question was, is, how is there a effort, is there an awakening? Like this summer we had an awakening on race, right? Is there an awakening to the abuse and the murder and the lack of safety for people who are transgender, non-binary, and non-gender conforming? And I think there is an awakening that is emerging within the lesbian, gay, and queer kind of circle community. But for it really to gel, it needs to exist outside, that awakening needs to exist outside of our community as well. And so what we've been doing in our community in Charlotte is working with our allies and saying, these are conversations that you all got to start having with your heteronormative, friends and family members, and helping them to see these things from your perspective and helping them to see how it affects them. how indirect, like, you know, I think people have a disconnect about how the murder, you know, the National Medical Association considers the murders and the assaults of Black trans women in America on pandemic level, right?
Mhm.
So helping non-queer folk understand that someone who hates transgenders doesn't just hate transgenders. They hate your lesbian niece as well. And they hate your gay nephew or your gay son or your gay daughter. So, you know, as Malcolm said, like, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And helping our allies make that link so that we can have that awakening in our community to the work that needs to be done to protect our non-cisgender family members.
I would like to piggyback on that because that's exactly where I was going, Jermaine. I think we talk about policy, legislation, even law enforcement, but I don't think there's enough emphasis put on what are we doing in our communities. And by that, I mean, not even on a grand scale of, you know, an organization that you may head, but something as small as you are the center of your universe, right? Your workplace, your family, your friends, the people that you interact with on a regular basis. How are you showing up for them? And then how does that extend itself outside of that general circle? I feel like the work should be happening on a policy level, of course, on a legislative level, law enforcement, of course, because those people are sworn officers and they have a duty to serve the communities that have elected them or selected them to be in those positions. But apart from that, there's work that we can do within our own community. I mean, if I'm being honest, for me, I've just recently, and by recently, I mean in the last couple of years, started to understand the importance of pronouns. And it's because I have friends who are younger than me who share with me, this is why this is important. Okay, you've opened my eyes to that. That's, I think, the real heart of this work, conversations that we're having, not just on a political or policy level, but just on a human level. And to your point, Jermaine, the people that you work with, the people that you talk to, you know, how are we showing up? How are people that we know showing up? And are we shying away from those conversations, or are we having those tough conversations in a way that everyone can be heard? And that means I'm going to listen to you, even if I think what you're saying is ignorant. It might not be willful ignorance. It may be genuine ignorance. You may genuinely not know, giving someone the benefit of the doubt to say, this person does not know. I'm going to assume the best and try to educate you. Now, what someone does after that, we have no control over, but you've planted a seed. And this work is not going to be done overnight. It's not, the ship is not going to flip. We just had another social uprising in 2020, the likes of which we had in the 60s, the likes of which we had in the 1900s, the likes of which we had in the 1850s, and on and on. So this country has some rooted issues that need to be turned around. Ours is going to take some time too. And I think it begins with those seedling conversations where we open people's eyes to who we are and why it's important not to ignore our differences, but to appreciate, respect, and support them.
Speak, Stephanie. Speak.
Yes, indeed. Now, Tracy, you had your hand up, and did you want
yes,
to add to
I
that?
just wanted to add, I believe the sister's name is Ashley Diamond. She's had a history with the Georgia corrections system where they're not giving her hormonal treatments and
yes,
and other medical needs. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Georgia has in place where the inmates must be provided with their medical, and that includes trans people. I'm not sure exactly, but it takes people like that to bring awareness to what's happening within our correction system. And you know, a lot of times in the correction system, some of the correctional officers are perpetrators of the abuse against trans and gender nonconforming people. And you know, it's open season, you know, with a trans person in there with a bunch of men, and you know, everybody feels like, well, they can do whatever they want and there are no repercussions for it. So that's why we advocate. That's why we fight for equity and human and civil rights for all of us, not just for trans and gender nonconforming people. We all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of where we come from, our backgrounds and economic status.
Certainly. I am so thankful that I live in a city where we have a mayor named Keisha and a liaison and communities and councils that are speaking to our leaders so that they can understand the disconnects and how to reconnect with our communities. But to talk, Jermaine said something earlier that struck me in the head. When we saw the death of George Floyd, the entire world was galvanized and moved forward. They understood what was happening. They understood what racism looks like. They understood what, the horror that most Black people in their communities face. And I'm wondering if the unfortunate has to happen in the transgender community, where someone like an Ashley Diamond or someone else has to die at the hands or, face some other atrocity while in prison before the community says, oh my God, this is happening. That's not what we want. So I'm hoping that there's a way, as you mentioned, Stephanie, that our community can say, look, if it affects one, it affects us all. How do we make that translate though?
Can I challenge that question, George? Because I firmly believe, with all of the hell that 2020 brought all of us, that the social movement that we saw, the movement that we saw around diversity, equity, and inclusion would not have been as grand if we weren't all sitting our tails at home.
True.
Forced to see it, forced to deal with it, because we can't go nowhere. So I pray to God a pandemic doesn't happen again anytime soon. But the blessing of that was that we were forced, and not by we, I mean all people, I mean white people, I mean people of all kinds were forced to see America in all of its dirt. Will that have to happen again for us to now be into this, to have this conversation in a real substantive way, in a way that people can see and understand their own prejudices and be willing to talk about them and start to affect change incrementally?
Malcolm, you had your hand up. You wanted to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I wanted to add that, it kind of did happen, right? Tony McDade, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and the one thing that I was going to add is that we have to work with the media and try to find out, why aren't these murders front page news when this happens? Why is it in the back of of the digital newspaper, if you will?
Certainly.
And then to piggyback on what Stephanie said earlier, it is about non-traditional training. One of the things that we're working on at Thrive is to put together a curriculum that, and Justine Ingram has been out to Thrive on many occasions and taught us, because I'm a 63-year-old gay man. I've been all of those things that a gay man is. I've been a faggot, I've been all of this other stuff. But I had to learn pronouns too. I had to learn how to understand, what goes on in the life of a trans woman, what goes on in the life of a trans man. I had to understand all of that. I had to learn about gender nonconforming. I didn't know anything about that until I started working at Thrive. And we cannot expect, just because you are in the LGBTQ, or as Tori said, under the umbrella, that you understand that. There is a lot of misinformation out there. And one of the things that we have to do is to be more affirming and more, provide that education. And don't expect, Stephanie, I almost applauded when you said, there's a difference between willful ignorance and ignorance. Because everybody always, they want to make ignorance sound like stupidity, and it's not the same thing. Ignorance means, you just didn't know. You just did not know, and that's okay. And when somebody comes to you and says, I'm sorry, I just didn't know, respect that and use that as a teaching moment, rather than jumping in their face and yelling and screaming and shouting. So, yeah.
Tracy?
Jermaine, you mentioned, I'm sorry, George, you mentioned earlier a mayor named Keisha. A mayor named Keisha is a prime example of leadership, making safe spaces, purposefully making safe spaces for all of us, including transgender, non-conforming, and non-binary people. On the 28th of this month, she's doing a signing ceremony at City Hall that designates all city-owned built property, airport, parks, recreation, designate gender-neutral restrooms. So that's an
Wow.
example of making safe spaces for us all. She also, for her first advisory board, she had 4 trans people, 3 trans people of color. You know, she on this advisory board, she has trans people. You know, so our voices are being heard, and that's an example of leadership, listening to the community, not making choices and decisions for us, but actually bringing us to the table, pulling up a seat, and letting us put our input in, which is amazing. Not every city can say that.
Exactly. Yes. Again, all accolades to Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, a shining example of what the connection should look like. I want to go back. Go ahead.
So George, what better way to segue to Pam, because Pam is one of the co-chairs of the advisory board.
I am.
And all of the stuff that we talk about, the mover is sitting right here at the table with us this evening. I just have to give her kudos where kudos are due for working as hard as she does. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that nobody knows about except for us who've had sit at this table. So I want you to hear from Pam and her job and her role in the city as she's playing and pushing some of this legislation through and getting to the voice of the city here.
No, I think you know, I'm around friends right now, so I'm in awe because I have so much love and I'm listening. I'm glad you called my name. I was in a trance trying to get caught up with all my folk. But it really, truly, I think it goes back. I think Tracy and even Tori said it earlier. Leadership matters. If you hear nothing else today, leadership matters, and leadership means creating those spaces where people can feel more comfortable in their own skin. It also means creating the policies and legislation that supports that belief and spirit. And it also means bucking against this whole trend that's starting to happen in waves where people are politicizing humanity. Meaning, if you believe in equality, you're on one side of the fence on politics. That makes no sense at all. So we have to be vigilant now, because storylines are getting created with misinformation. Social media posts are coming across like experts without researching or investigating the truth. We have to stay vigilant. And what I appreciate about the board, the mayor's board, is it has such talented advocates and activists like you hear on these phones who've been a part of this movement, trying to make it better, not just for our community, but for all people. We try to do the halo effect. So the policies, the movements, the events that we try to do, it's going to absolutely benefit and keep our community safe. But we do it with such an inclusive spirit. We're trying to make it better for everyone. So my encouragement for everyone listening, and you talked about how do we continue to advance this movement and continue to make it safe and continue to protect members of our community, our collective community. You have to stay grounded and vigilant against misinformation. The second is you have to advocate for the policies and the legislations. It's not enough for leaders to be at the top with belief. Belief does not create a safe space that we need, right? That's just not enough. That's a start though. I think someone said earlier, some people are on other ends, and just getting them to believe and advocate and accept is a whole other thing. But once you get past there, you have to create legislation and policy that actually creates systemic protections for people so that they can live their best lives. And that is the work of the board. That's the work many members here on the phone who've been a part of the board or on the board now with the mayor, but it's just not enough to believe, and you just have to be vigilant, and you have to do your own research, because people are into clickbait now, where if I put a headline, that's the truth, and that's just not the case anymore.
Certainly, certainly. Pamela, for those who are watching this live now or the rebroadcast, how do they get more involved with the advisory board or meetings, or come get the information that Keisha Lance, Mayor Bottoms, excuse me, and the advisory board are putting together?
We actually have our own social media handle. And so what I'll do here in the chat, I'll post it here. And if you can post on there, get involved. The big thing is we announce a lot of the events that Tracy just alluded to a moment ago. Come and support them. Amplify them by sharing them on your own websites. And I know everybody's in a different space on sharing. I'm not on social media as frequently as I want to be because of my travel, but I tell you this, when I do amplify something, people know it's important. And so I would start to follow us on social media. The second is attend the events, participate in events like this. And the third is amplify the news by posting it on your own channels and network. And going back to, change happens with you first, because whether you're an ally here on the phone or you're a member of the community, to help people understand the plights of others, I mean, from a real heart place, not a head place, a heart place, the change begins to happen even more aggressively for us.
Thank you so very much. As we were having a conversation earlier about pronouns, and I host a morning show with allies of the community. Mm-hmm. And I'm constantly, the he, she, they, we, them, us, our conversation continues to evolve. And Malcolm even mentioned the gender non-conforming and all of the verbiage in our society. And it's really important, just to piggyback on it, that we continue to educate, because our language in our community is ever evolving. And I know wait a minute, that's a new one there. Let me figure this out. Have you found yourselves, anybody, in the midst of a conversation around allies or people who want to be informed, struggling to understand and then educate people around you on that process? Pamela, go ahead.
You know what? It's yes. And I think someone said earlier too that we have to educate our own community too. Mm-hmm. The community has evolved. It's evolved. There's in beautiful ways, but in ways that some people haven't caught up with. So it's not just about allies getting educated. It's about our own community getting educated. And there are so many organizations and their information that you can really get grounded on. Human Rights Campaign, Trevor Project, GLAD. There's so many different organizations that you could really get grounded on that space. But I always say this on pronouns and why it's so important. It is the one visual artifact that if you put on Zoom or anywhere, that someone in the community will know that they're safe. And so if people say, I want to be an ally, it is the easiest non-tension way to demonstrate that you're an ally. I have it on every corporate meeting I have. I'm talking to CEOs globally. I'm talking to them domestically, and I have my pronouns on there. And sometimes I get a nod from someone on the other side who doesn't feel safe to be out at that level, and they know that they're safe. And so I would just encourage, it's a gesture that's so meaningful to the community, but it's also that sign that says, I'm in a safe space. And so that consideration, but I think the education is not just for allies. I do believe it's also for our own community.
Tracy, you want to add to that?
Yes, I just want to add to the wonderful suggestions that Pamela just offered. Just really quickly, if you want to advocate for trans and ally for trans and make safe spaces for transgender non-conforming people, number one, don't be weird. We're human beings just like you are. Treat us the same. Stop making assumptions, number two, about someone's gender based upon their appearance. Number three, words matter. Use gender neutral affirmative language. Number four, advocate for gender neutral restrooms in your place of employment, in your businesses. etc. Number 5, don't tolerate transphobic jokes or comments when you hear them. You know, call them out on it. And number 6 is stop questioning our experiences and stop questioning our existence on this planet. We've been here since written history began, and we're going to always be here. So, I mean, just treat us like the human beings like you are, and you know, practice the golden rule, and we'll be okay.
Now, what do you say to people, and I've had this conversation, why can't I just call you your name? Why do I have to say he, she? I don't understand. What do you say to those people when they balk back in that way?
Ignorance, you know, purposeful ignorance. You know, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you to treat me the way I want to be treated, you know.
Mm. And Pamela, I see your hand is still up. Did you want to add to that, or did you? Okay, great. I want to change directions just a little bit. 37 states still criminalize HIV exposure. The laws for the 50 states in the District of Columbia were assessed and categorized. HIV laws that criminalize or control behaviors that could potentially expose another person to HIV. That's one. Sexually transmitted diseases, communicable contagious infectious diseases. That's another. Sentence enhancement laws to specific HIV or STD that do not criminalize a behavior, but increase the sentence length when a person with HIV commits certain crimes. And I want to talk to that. Why are we still in 2020 criminalizing people with HIV? And I know that's really your field of expertise, Malcolm. So I'm looking to you to kind of start that conversation.
Yeah. So the good news is California just signed a law. Illinois just signed a law. So I think we're down to 32. And if anybody cares to attend, the HIV is Not a Crime conference is going on next week. So come to that to get some information. But the question is why?
Yes.
Because in 1980, 1990, everybody was scared and people were dying and they didn't know, or they claimed they didn't know, and they decided that, okay, we will put along the books that you have to tell. And, you know, ever since those laws came out, and again, you know, I talked earlier about being ignorant. You know, as a gay man, I didn't even know that. I didn't know, you know, until like the early 2000s. But what we have to understand is that the laws are there, and the laws are still on the books despite the science, right? So the science says that if I'm taking my antiretrovirals, I'm undetectable. I cannot transmit HIV. So why on earth am I being charged with attempted murder or whatever the statute is in your state or local jurisdiction? That makes no sense. Georgia Justice Coalition, we just started working. Well, we worked last year and almost got there. Got to the end of the legislative session when one senator put an amendment onto the bill, Senate Bill 164. And at the end, it did not pass. But what we fought for was, okay, we didn't get them to stop the felony, but we were able to say, okay, reduce the sentence to 5 years and then prove intent, prove ability to transmit. Okay. If you're going to put this on a felony, we said we fought over the whole felony thing, and we said, well, we'll come back to the felony. We just, we have to move in gradual steps. Change doesn't happen, especially in the South, when it benefits people of color. Change ain't happening today, but we have to move slowly. So we said, okay, we will deal with the felony next year, but you reduce the sentence, you prove intent, you prove ability to transmit. We can work with that, and so that's what we're going next year. We are working with the Sero Project. we are working all across the country to get these laws changed. But in answer to your question, it's fear. And they stay on the books because now they realize, you know what? The people that are being criminalized are mostly people of color, people that look like me. You know, if we can put a criminal record on you, we're gonna do it. So we're gonna try to find a way. So that's what that's about. But we are definitely fighting. And what's interesting is that in a state like Georgia, we truly had bipartisan support for our bill. I mean, overwhelming Republican and Democrat support for our bill. So I don't know if there's anything else right now that is really bipartisan, right? I mean, the way the world that we live in right now, there isn't much else bipartisan, but this is a bipartisan issue. You will always find one person that, like we said this time, that threw something into the ring at the last minute. But I definitely think we can get this done. The criminalization of HIV, it's time for it to be over. You know, medication is out there. People are, and then not only that, let me add one more thing. Because we talk about U equals U, we talk about decriminalizing, but we also have to understand that U equals U needs to, you have to look at that from a lens of access to care, right? If a person does not have access to medication in a state where we have not expanded Medicaid and now we're coming up with these waivers, we need to be able to work that side of the aisle as well to make sure that we know that we can end HIV, but we have to do it so that everybody has access.
Certainly. This is a great conversation because you mentioned earlier that the reason that most of these laws existed was because of fear, lack of knowledge. And when you go into these rooms and you talk with people who are making these decisions, how can they even sit with the science in front of them, with the rationale in front of them, with the evidence in front of them and still say, yeah, but why is that still a part of their conversation? What was their reasoning? What was some of the conversations that you had with people who are making decisions in those rooms?
That, you know, those people, they believe that they can't sell that to their constituents. You know, we live in a state that, you know, COVID wasn't real, right? We live, you know, we know a bunch of people that would walk up to you and tell you that there was no such thing as COVID and I'm not wearing my mask. So this is the lens that we're, you know, and Pamela alluded to it earlier. This fake news environment that we're in, where people get their news on Facebook, they verify it on Twitter, and they repeat it on Instagram. It's, you know, we really have to work with our people to educate them. You know, one of the things that we are talking about now is not only do we have to educate our legislators, our senators, you know, at the state level, but we also have to educate our community. Because if you ask the average, you know, Black gay man on the street today, if you had sex with somebody and they didn't tell you that they were living with HIV, what would you do? Most of them would tell you they should go to jail.
Exactly, and that's what happens right now.
Exactly.
That's why we're in the state that we're in right now with this, is because often we look at it as revenge. Okay, that fear within you, that you don't want nobody to know what you've done behind that closed door, now has become something else that you have to deal with. And what you have to deal with now is a public issue. So you went from private to public, because once you contract the disease, it becomes public to a certain extent.
Certainly.
Because when you go to the health clinic, or you go get a test, your name, your address, your social security, just a whole lot of things just to get a test. Because when it comes back and it comes back positive, the state wants to know. Okay.
Certainly. and then you become stigmatized. And
Yes.
I think that's a part of the reason that a lot of people don't have those conversations. Like we kind of are alluding to, they don't have the conversation. Hey, this is my status, because you don't want to be in that box where I may be criminalized or penalized, or you can use this against me later. Tracy, you had your hand up. Did you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, follow up with what everybody was saying. You asked about fear and the lack of knowledge. You asked why were people still, being arrested and using those draconian laws. You have people who still believe that Trump is going to be reinstated as president. That's why, you have people who still believe in the lie. So
Yes.
choose to be ignorant, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do about that. We can provide all the education we want, all the training, but if people choose to be ignorant, they're going to be ignorant.
Tori?
I was trying not to say anything, but so I'll make this a
No, please do. But yes.
So there are a number of things that are at work here. I talk a lot about race, and if it makes people uncomfortable, then good. And because so many of the systems that we navigate, were created. So all of the systems that we navigate, including the healthcare systems and specifically HIV care systems, they weren't created for any of us whose face I see. They were created by gay white men who were dying of AIDS. And that's the language that they used in the Denver Principles, 1983. You can Google it. Actually, somebody put it and make sure that all of the attendees can see it also. A link to the Denver Principles in the chat. But in 1983, they established these healthcare guidelines. Excuse me, my camera light keeps going off. About how they should die in dignity. People who are living with AIDS should die in dignity. And so the HIV healthcare was created by them for their own benefit. And the reason that matters when it comes to healthcare and when it comes to HIV criminalization laws, thank you, George, is because these laws, criminalization laws, are disproportionately, I think I heard Malcolm allude to this, they disproportionately impact people of color, and even more disproportionately impact Black people, because Black people and people of color are two different groups of people. So Black people are people of color, but so is an Asian American person, so is a Native American person, so is a person from Brazil, and so is a person from Thailand. And so is a person from Israel, and so is a person from Lebanon. But when it comes to navigating systems in the United States, no other group of people on the face of the earth, certainly not here in the United States, face more barriers than Black people, who are also people of color. So we have to make that distinction. But criminalization laws, we know that they don't match up with science. Science clearly has stated, and people who are living with HIV have known this for many, many years, that when you take your medicine regularly and you maintain an undetectable viral load for 6 consecutive months, can pass HIV along to your sexual partners. It doesn't happen. Before, folks would have said it doesn't happen. Now science says it can't happen.
Right.
There's a difference, doesn't and can't. And science has proven that it doesn't happen. And so until criminalization laws, like Tracy said, these are folks who still believe that Trump's going to be back in office next month. They still believe that somehow Biden convinced electors to vote. There's a whole bunch of stupidity. And I've attempted not to curse all day, and I've been doing really
You're doing
really
great.
good.
It almost slipped out just now, though. But we have to remember that. And we have to understand that when it comes, so much of that is about messaging too. We have people in our own families that don't understand anything about you equals you who've never heard of it. They still, they still talk to people who have HIV. They still say, "You sick?"
Wow.
No, you just have an HIV diagnosis. Wow. They don't ask people with arthritis, are they sick, do they? So we have to think about that, and the systemic oppression that exists in all of these institutions, in the legal system, that exists in the medical system, that exists in the media, that exists in law and policy making, and the oppressive nature of what laws. Who created the laws? First of all, let's think about that. How many Black queer people were involved in creating the laws? How many involved in making laws that criminalize people with HIV? And the answer is probably none.
None.
The reasons why it maintains like this. So we need to make sure that we're electing folks who represent our communities and are parts of our communities, because you can represent my community and not be a part of it. Ossoff is a great example of that, but you can also be a part of my community. Park Cannon is an example of that. And so we have to make sure that our folks are in there, and because they understand our issues, because our issues are their issues. And I was really trying to be quiet.
No, you did good, because you bring me to a point that I know everyone is going to have. Just because you're part of the community does not mean you represent me. And I want to talk about one person in particular who is running for governor in a particular state, California, who is a part of a community, the transgender community, but does not necessarily represent the transgender community. Caitlyn Jenner.
Don't go there.
I'm sorry, too late. We've arrived. Caitlyn Jenner is running for office. And I believe now she is saying that she's a liberal. Is that what she's saying? Really a Republican disguised as a liberal. Let's just be clear on that. And she's already
Republican.
she's already sounding like a Republican, because she's already spoken about how transgender women should not be allowed to participate in sports. She's even advocating for a board to measure the authenticity of a transgender person.
And she's a transgender. She's a trans person, honey.
There you go. Right there.
That sums her up.
About that,
honey. Please.
She's a trans woman, but she's also an Olympic athlete. I am a former professional basketball player, and let me tell you something right now. I played on the highest level you can play on. I do not want to play against someone who is born man. I don't. And I'm going to be straight out about that, because there are absolute differences in what a human body is capable of. This is science. This is not what's being made up. This is scientific. Unless you are a bodybuilder and you push your body to certain limits, and in those sports, you can see women who push themselves to certain limits, men who push themselves to certain limits. There are certain sports that are not contact sports that, yes, I think the differences don't matter so much. But when you are talking contact sports, you can be endangering a young girl. You can be endangering someone who is in her developmental stages of life by putting her up against someone who she cannot physically compete against. Now, does that mean that every trans woman or every trans man is developing at the same rate? No. Does that mean that every trans woman who or young boy who's transitioning to girl or identifies as girl, does that mean that she is stronger than everybody? No, that does not mean that. But I'm talking about playing sports on a high level where you are very competitive, where strength matters, where injuries can maim someone for life. That is a concern for me. And I'm gonna be straight out about that, because I've done it. So I'm not a Caitlyn Jenner fan at all. I don't really know much about her apart from the Kardashians and the fact that Caitlyn Jenner was once an Olympic athlete. And that may be the perspective that she's speaking from, having been an athlete who performed at the highest levels and who understands that part, understands being an athlete. So I think what we can, I would love to have that discussion here, because we all wear different hats. Not just fancy ones like this, but I am a woman. I am a Black woman. I am a lesbian woman. I'm an athlete. I'm a business professional. And all of those parts of me have different opinions about different situations. And I think the diversity of thought should also be appreciated, because as an athlete, I have to tell you, I take issue with that, because I have been in some situations. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that. I would love for this to be a fruitful debate. Certainly. And I hope I'm not being offensive to anyone. I'm not trying to. I'm speaking as an athlete right now, not as a Black lesbian woman. I'm speaking as someone who has been sent home because I got an elbow on my neck one time and I couldn't talk for a week. Okay, that's what I'm speaking as right now. So let's talk about it, guys. I'd love to have that conversation.
Well, first, I want to be as a moderator. Every opinion, every subject that we talk about, your opinion, your voice is, lauded and appreciated. And we want you to, because this is the conversation that we want to have.
Absolutely.
Everyone in this room is an advocate for or an ally of the LGBTQI community, otherwise you would not be here. And your comments do reflect a lot of people in America, Stephanie, so you are not alone. But I see Tori has her hand up, and I'd love to know what you have to say about this.
Thank you, Stephanie, because I know that, in this political correct environment, that's something that a lot of folks don't want to hear. I respect your opinion, period. So I will also offer this.
Okay.
Many of us, when we think about, we personalize all of our situations. It's human experience. It is what we do. So I'm 5'11". I was 5'11" at 11 years old. So it personalize it, and then I'll take from micro to macro. At 5'11" in middle school, I could beat, and I was someone who was assigned male at birth, I could beat a lot of the boys and a lot of the girls. I couldn't come close to Mary Lewis. Mary Lewis was assigned female at birth. All right. Now, that was great in middle school, but by the time I got to high school in the 9th grade, I was one of the shortest kids playing sports. All right. There are certain physical characteristics that are simply better for more sports. How tall are you?
I'm 6'1".
So at 6'1", would you agree that in traditional women's basketball, that you'd be better suited to play forward or center than someone who's 5'1"?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. So that's simply biological. It has nothing to do with your gender identity. It has nothing to do with the medicine you're taking. That's simply a physical difference that makes you better suited for a certain position. All right. 5'11", that worked for me in middle school, but it didn't in high school. That's great. So understanding that framework, when we think macro, you have to understand that, first of all, it's weird. This is the opposition, and we all would agree that we're talking about the opposition here, has made it into a much bigger issue than it is. There are a handful of trans kids.
Agree.
Two specifically that all of this legislation is centered around.
Agree.
And incredibly high amount, there's such a racial aspect. This happened in Connecticut. And white kids, their parents reported 2 Black trans girls because their 2 daughters, who weren't number 1 and 2 in the state, didn't win races against them. And the 2 trans girls weren't number 1 and 2 in the state either. That's the root of it. So there's a lot of racism attached to it. Really, from a micro level, when we think based on, if we only personalize stuff, you're saying that a trans man can compete against your daughter, someone who's been on testosterone, someone who has developed more muscle tone, because that's what testosterone does. That it is more equitable, because we're not talking about equality, we're talking about equitability when we're talking about sports, that it is more equitable to put someone who takes affirming hormones to bulk up themselves than it is for someone who takes feminizing hormones, which in reality actually reduce muscle tone. That's taking out the gender identity. And I also want to make it clear, I'm not trying to convince you, because I don't believe human beings, we have the ability to convince people to change their minds. Our job is simply to provide education. But when we think of it like that and take ourselves out of it and think of the bigger picture, I think what it does is it provides an opportunity to say, you know what, that wouldn't have worked for me. But the bigger picture is, maybe it's discriminatory.
I
think this blanket policy is just not the right thing.
I agree with you that a blanket policy isn't the right thing, but I do also think that it needs to be examined, because there are certain sports that will put people at risk for injury. And for me as an athlete, safety is always number one. It doesn't matter if you are born male, born female, or trans male, trans woman, whatever it is, your safety is number one. And if anything is going to put that safety at risk, we have to evaluate that as people, especially in high school and university level, when kids are at developmental ages, certain injuries could really, really impact them for the rest of their life. And so that's where I'm coming from with it. We have to evaluate it. Blanket on anything, I don't think is good for most things. You know, if you put a blanket on most things, it's gonna hit a good number of the people in a negative way. So I'm not here for a blanket, but I am here for examination, because I understand the risks involved when you're playing against just stronger girls. The same way in reverse. If there is a trans boy or a boy who's transitioning to female from male, I'm not comfortable with her or him, going out for the football team. You're not ready. That's a contact sport that could injure you in a way that would impact you for the rest of your life if you haven't fully transitioned.
So we have girls that play football on college teams. They not trans nothing. Okay. They went out and played football because they wanted to play football and had nothing to do with anything until now. All of a sudden, a transgender wants to play a sport that is against their gender opposite. Now that's a problem. So now you're saying that a transgender male to female or female to male can't run track.
What I'm saying
now
is,
I feel because you're taking drugs that you're gonna beat me because you're enhanced in some kind of way.
Well, any drug.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about.
Performance enhancing drug is not okay in any sport. But what I'm saying is a blanket is not okay. Exactly.
No, a blanket is never okay.
If
we
understand
that.
Yeah, if a girl is playing football, I think that's the exception and not the rule. If she's playing football, more power to her. But she is choosing to put herself at that risk, at that level.
Exactly. Yeah. So now we have NFL players who are coming down with head injuries, but somehow or another, the NFL says, oh, no, that's not happening. But it's happening to Black athletes. And where is the care and the concern or the passion about them?
Yes.
Tracy, you had your hand up, and I want you to get in here.
I just want to add, I agree. It's a personal choice. It's up to that person to choose if they want to play football, and they have to make that risk assessment for themselves. But my challenge is to say for everyone, whether you choose to or not, you cannot. So yeah.
Let me throw something in here that can maybe change the trajectory of the conversation or add to it. Now, Olympic champion and runner, Caster Semenya, is a huge example of this debate we're having. She is a born female, a cisgender female. For those of you that don't know, she was born a female, that is cisgender. And she has been accused of or being targeted not to participate in her sport of choice because her testosterone level is higher than the females that she competes against. And they assume that of course makes her stronger and is inequitable or unfair to her opponents. But she was born this way. She didn't choose it. She didn't enhance it, all of these things. So to go back to your point, Stephanie, if we are looking at just that as a reason as to why a transgender person can't participate in their sport of choice, then that's going to snowball back into people like Caster or other people who are in sports who are cisgender born. So we have to look at it from both sides of that coin. Agreed. Even if we don't have a blanket statement, once we start dissecting and looking at microscopically, if you will, at someone's DNA makeup, then everybody is up for debate on whether they should be on the team or not. Tori, you had your hand up, and I just wanted to throw that in there. And Stephanie, come back to it if you want to. But
Sure.
Tori, go ahead.
Yeah.
And Stephanie, I want you to feel affirmed by every.
Certainly.
Listen, it's all good. It's all good. I'm taking bows in the neck. This is light work right here.
I was a little scared when you brought up Castor at first, George, but I think you handled that well. But I'd like to also make the point. So you mentioned that you were 6'1", Stephanie, right?
Yeah.
So here's where trans policies affect folks who aren't trans.
Okay.
Based on sheerly your physical height, if you are excelling in basketball, which clearly you, because I Googled you, if there are folks who say, well, you know what, girls aren't usually that tall, that's a trans. So then you could be thrown off the basketball team simply because someone accuses you of being trans because you're taller than other girls.
Is that what the law is right now?
Yes, that's exactly.
Yes, exactly. In some states, that is exactly.
Yes, and also understand that's what started the whole Castor Semenya debate, because someone accused this woman of being trans.
Wow.
All right, so there's that. So it's all based. So much of it is based on other people's perception. That's why
Salem witch trials happening right now.
Of course. So I also think on a macro level, but I also want to make this point as well. So one of the things that people forget is that so much of this legislation also comes with the caveat that there are some lawmakers who are saying, this is how we're going to protect little girls. You want to do genital exams on these kids to make sure that they're not trans.
Yeah.
So that's the part that we're leaving out here.
Wow.
That's so now to me, that sounds very pedophilia-ish.
Very.
Because I don't think anybody other than a doctor or your parents should be
Absolutely.
in kids' private parts.
And as
that's
a parent, I wish you might.
Yes, and also keep in mind that this is a bunch of cis, heterosexual, old white men
yes.
policies who don't have trans children, who don't have trans wives, who are not trans themselves, and who don't have trans people in this circle.
Some may be creeping with some trans people now, don't.
They might be. And so here's another thing, and I promise I'm gonna step back because I'm taking up too much space, but also think about this. These are the same people that are saying that people with uteruses don't have the power to make decisions with their own uteruses. These are the same people. They're saying that because you have a uterus and I don't, that we shouldn't be able to compete against each other. We can play chess together, but we can't play chess on the same team because that's also a sport.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you on that point. And even George, what you were saying earlier, like I don't advocate for, this blanketed approach. I certainly don't advocate for anyone who is not a licensed medical professional doing any kind of check on any child on their person, period. Don't touch my child unless you want me to touch you, period. So I'm with you on that, but I am, as an athlete, I do think there needs to be further conversation about it because I want to keep everybody safe. You know what I'm saying? I want to keep everybody safe. If it's chess, if it's track, if it's something that's non-contact, I don't even think it's a conversation. If it's a contact sport where I could be running up, or some little girl or some little boy or whomever can be running up against somebody that can put them at risk for life-altering injury, you have to examine that. You have, in a fair and just and equitable way, to your point, Tori, you have to examine that. What does that examination look like? I don't know. This is all new. This is all new conversation. But I'm just speaking from the aspect of being on the field in a contact sport and knowing and having been injured and having seen people be injured and just speaking out of concern. That's it. Now, who knows what this conversation will be in 2 years and 3 years and 5 years. I certainly hope that it is not to the point where, Handmaid's Tale or whatever is going on with that. I hope we're not there. But in the field of sports, I definitely think it needs to be a conversation that's had to make sure that we have sports to me is the only area for the most part where if you're inside of the lines, the same rules apply to everybody, unless you got some bad refs, then that's something else. But if you're inside of those lines, the same rules are supposed to apply across the board. I think that's why people love sports. I think that's why people are fanatics about sports, is because that's one place where it's supposed to be fair. You know,
I will respectfully disagree. Sports by nature are not intended to be fair. If so, every team would have a 7-foot center.
No, I mean the rules. The
rules, but
I'm talking about the rules, not
the rules. Yes,
the rules,
but not the sport itself. Or every basketball team would have 4 people who are 6 feet, 4 people who are 7 feet. Every swim team would have a Michael Phelps. Every baseball team, but that's fair.
If it was fair,
that's
yes,
fair.
Fair. When I say fair, I mean the rules of the game. If you're inside of whatever the field of play is, the rules of the game are the rules of the game, and how you develop yourself as an athlete. How tall you, no one can control how tall they are or short. No one can control, what they're given at birth, i.e. the young lady who runs track who has more testosterone. If that's your DNA, that's your DNA. And some people are more predisposed to be athletic. We know this. Some people are more predisposed to be musicians or academics or what have you. Yeah, of course, we all have different gifts. But the sport itself, inside of the rectangle, that's where it's supposed to be as fair as possible. That's why people love them. So anyway, respectfully disagree, but I think it's a fantastic discussion, for real.
A great discussion. Yeah. I think we're going to be where we were on the previous conversation with HIV criminalization. The science has to catch up with everybody's conversation.
That's right.
The science has to prevail and say, this is the evidence, this is where we are. But back to the great point, Tori, that you had about fairness. And when you look at sports, it's all about who's the strongest, who's the fastest, who's the quickest, who's the most agile, who's the most skillful. And if we're looking at transgender people competing in cisgender sports, that is the objective, to be the fastest, the strongest in whatever sport you are. And if you're predisposed by whatever condition, whatever transition, then that is what the sport is created to do. It is to be a competition. So if you on this team are a person who's stronger, cisgendered or transgendered, or faster, cisgendered or transgendered, where does that sense of unfairness happen? Where does it actually happen? Back to the other point, when we look at the examination of the genitals of transgender or assumed transgender people, it even goes beyond that, because if a parent of a child says that I think that person is transgender, and they do an examination and they determine that they are cisgender born, there can be an even more invasive DNA inspection of that person. So it goes on and on and on and on and on. And so when we look at the fairness, when we look at the transparency, when we look at the lack of science in order to continue the discussion, we're at a very, very unsafe place for transgender children, and for children who are allies to those kids in their schools. Anybody want to piggyback on that? Tori, you got it. You holding it. I
just want to say I concur with what you just said, George.
Thank you so very much. Now I wanted to stay back on Caitlin and the legislation that's happening. Let me move forward, but I'll stay on Caitlin and other politicians. That's where I was. So it's like, I can't take it no about. We have politicians who are making legislation on how transgender people can progress into bathrooms. There is a law, I believe in Arkansas, I did not do my due diligence, but I believe it's in Arkansas, where if you are in a federal building and a transgender person comes into the restroom, you can by all accounts be offended and sue because you were offended because that transgender person came into the restaurant. That's where we are in legislation. That's where we are with politicians. So it goes back to us being very involved in the community, in the LGBTQI community, not to just sit there on our laurels and watch things happen, to be very accountable on who's sitting in those seats, who's making those decisions, to make sure that we have a Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms who are allies to us in our communities. Would anybody like to speak to any of those laws that are transgressing through our legislation right now?
George, I just think it comes to voter education. I just think that, the time for voter apathy, people just don't believe that if they vote, it makes a difference. I am nervous about what is going on right now with, 50 senators and Vice President Harris and Joe Manchin. I'm just very nervous that people are going to say, well, we voted, we stood online and we did this to turn Georgia blue, and nothing is changing. And that apathy is is what has gotten us where we are right now. And we'll continue because, we talked about the people who believe that Donald Trump is going to be reinstated in August. Those folks are mobilizing. They are working hard to make sure that these people and these laws are passed. I was very upset when everybody kept saying, well, we've turned Georgia blue, because that leads to apathy also. It leads to people think, because
we're comfortable now.
Yeah, and nobody understands the difference between the state and the federal and the US House and the US Senate. We did, at Thrive, we did what we call AIDS Watch Out last year because during the pandemic, AIDS Watch went virtual. So we said we wanted to add something else. And we did a pre-engagement survey. And we asked people, do you know who your US congressperson is? Do you know who your US senator is? Do you know who your state senator is? Do you know who your state congressman is? 25 people in the group, some of them, experienced advocates, did not know who their state senators were, did not know who their state House representative was. And they don't know what laws happen at the state level. They don't understand that the ACA passed, but Georgia didn't expand Medicaid. They don't understand all of those things. So when you talk about these types of laws are at the state and local level. And if the only time they vote is when the president is on the ballot, then we have a problem. And we've always had that problem. This year, in 2020, people were energized to get rid of Trump. I am so worried about 2022. So one of the things that we want to do is to start educating, and we're putting programs in place to do that, to educate people at the city level, at the Ryan White Planning Council level, at the state level, so that people understand how this works. Because a lot of folks just don't get it. And not their fault. I don't think we teach civics anymore.
No.
So, ignorance is the plan. The stupider the people are, the more we can put over on them. And we have to get to the point where we, as a people, as a community, are teaching our brothers, sisters, I think it was Pamela who said earlier, teach the people that are around you. I kind of get in trouble sometimes for talking about politics too much and talking about policy too much, but I do it for that reason, because I'm really at the point where whatever you're talking about, trans issues, LGBT issues, Black issues, policing issues, whatever we're talking about, so much of this stuff happens around the corner from your house and not in Washington, D.C.
Certainly. Yeah, I have a coworker who I often I listen to her. She's a very wise person, Sophia McIntosh. I'm sure a lot of you know her, and she always says, "Honey, the dog catcher today can be the state senator tomorrow." So that's why it's important for you to show up no matter if you're voting for the dog catcher or whoever, because that person could be in a higher position at a later date. Tracy and Pamela, I see you both have your hands up. Tracy, I'll go to you first.
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback on what Malcolm just said about education and complacency. You know, when we had the election for the president, I heard, unfortunately, I heard a lot of people say, "Oh, girl, we're done yet. We in there. We don't. That's it." I'm like, "Girl, we still have to have senators. We still have to have elect people that support our president and support the policies." And Malcolm, please don't stop talking about policies and how they affect us. Don't ever stop talking about it, because that's how change is made on the policy level. Back to the bathroom laws that you were talking about, it's all about assumptions. Who's going to determine who's trans and who's not going into the restroom to just pee in peace? Are we going to have policing, restroom policing now? You know, it doesn't make any sense. So you have crazy people making crazy laws, you know, that are affecting real people's lives.
Yes.
And again, that's why it is so very important. And to say what Tracy said, yes, Malcolm, we have to educate. I'm probably one of those people guilty of not knowing everybody's name, but I will research it and find out. But at the same time, we are responsible on the state level. The local level is where these changes are happening and affect us immediately, more often than not. Pamela?
I want to build on Malcolm and Tracy. I think two things. The education is so essential, but it's still so intellectual when people talk about politics and elections. I really do believe there should be just a go-to page that has sheriff and what kind of decisions that sheriff gets to make on your life. What impact is that? A senator, what kind of decisions? President, all the way, from local to national, what kind of decisions are made, and we need to post it everywhere. And we need to do it as a coalition, whether it be people of color, including Black people, whether it be LGBTQ, every underrepresented community needs to put it. Every single social media platform needs to build websites around it where it shows. And if it exists, I don't know about it. But I think that we continue to make it so intellectual to vote when we just have to make it very everyday. Your next decision on, the principal in your school who will affect the everyday life of your child is made by this superintendent. Things that are just very simple so that people can understand. So that's the first. The second is people can't get complacent because we're not protected at a federal level yet. So someone asked the question about what's happening nationally. There's a coalition of organizations that serve the LGBT community from a local level to a national level, dozens of names, and human rights campaigns at the forefront. And there are dozens of names, and all of the major LGBTQ organizations have partnered in coalition, because the most important thing to get done over this next term is to get the Equality Act passed. And for those who do not know what the Equality Act is, it will prevent discrimination due to sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity at a federal level. And that's what we need, because still today, people can get thrown out of their houses, people can get fired from their jobs, all these different things. We don't have federal protections if a state overrules it and has a policy. And that's the legislation we need so that we can change and institute that policy to have protections. So if anyone is in earshot and believes that we've arrived, I assure you, there is so much more work to do. And so if, again, influencing your circle, the circle of friends who are for your beliefs and circle of friends who are not for your beliefs, have the conversation so that people can understand your walk of life. It's so essential.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Malcolm, you had something else to add to this?
Sorry, I don't know if you guys could hear this air conditioner that sounds like an airplane engine behind me, but yeah, I just, when Pam was speaking, I just thought about it. When you talk about what does the sheriff do, I just want y'all to think about this. The last time you went to vote and you saw sheriffs and judges on the ballot, did you know anything about those people? Because they don't have commercials. The sheriff will have a commercial, but all it says is, vote for me. But you have to really dig deep to get the information about those, unless they're a senator, a congressperson running for president or whatever. The district attorney, Joe Blow is running for district attorney.
Mm-hmm. Who is he? What is his agenda? Yes.
Yeah. And judges, and so, to piggyback on, and Pamela, I will be in touch with you because, like I said, we are putting together this curriculum, and we really want to make sure that we are breaking it down to the level so that people understand the cause and effect. Who is this person? What does this person do? What does he have control over? And once they know that, they can make an informed decision. We run a 501c3. We can't tell anybody who to vote
for, right?
We can tell you what to vote
for. Yeah. But
not
who to vote for.
That's right. And how to look to see who that person is that's going to advocate for you. So that is important in every walk of life. But now when people see the whole George Floyd situation and Black people and people of all colors out in the street, there's going to be pushback. And that's what this is. They are going to hold on to their fiefdom, their kingdom, as long as they possibly can. And they have resorted to what we know are lies and everything else, and large media companies pushing those lies out. So people aren't going to believe it. So the only way that we're going to counter it is, well, George, I know you have the money to buy a large media company, so.
All right now. Okay.
I don't want us to forget one very important piece of this voter suppression. See, now it has taken on a new shape and a new color. And this is where I feel that we will lose our people because they can't afford to stand in the line. So if it's all about my paycheck or going, or standing in this line, they're going to go get the paycheck. So with this, it's more that we have to now wrap our arms around our young folk, our young voters, to make them understand, don't get out of that line. We have to come up with ways in which our people can go to the poll and vote. Okay, so get your 50 IDs together. We have, as a people, have managed to, whatever roadblock you put in front of us, we found a way to get around it. And what I want our people to understand is now we can't leave them. It's more important now that those of us in the advocacy world reach out and grab these young folk and take them along for this ride, because they're the only ones that are going to reach that young voter to not discourage them. So we have to keep encouraging them. And those are the ones that we've got to educate about getting to the poll. See, we learned from the old folk when we got the right to vote, we always have went to go vote because that's what mama did. And that's what grandmama did. And they said, when you were old enough, you're going to go vote. That's what we did. But now there's a disconnect in that. And we've got to go back to where we used to be. So let's not let this voter suppression be a stoppage, but only a stepping stone for us to get to where we need to go. So I believe that we got to show them better than we can tell them.
Certainly.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
And talking about messaging. I think Pamela was just talking about how Democrats as a whole on the national, on a federal and local and state level, the messaging is so intellectual. It is so highbrow. It is so, you have all this pedigree and you want to sound a certain way, which is fantastic. You need experience, you need education, you need all of those things, I think, to be a good policymaker and legislator and all of those things. But who are you talking to? Do they have that degree? Mm-hmm. Do they have that pedigree? Do they even understand what the hell you're talking about? The last two major elections that were won, Donald Trump and President Obama. Yes, we can. 3 words, 1 message, easy to penetrate. And people understood that and fell in love with the concept of yes, we can, and everything that came with that. Donald Trump speaks in small sound bites. I think his educational level of vocabulary probably is less than my 10-year-old. But who was he talking to? And did they understand his language? And was he able to galvanize throngs of people behind these sound bites of lies? So if we can figure out how to deliver a message to people who we want to galvanize in a language that they understand, but that can penetrate and have and galvanize them, I think that's the ticket. As long as we are speaking in this highbrow language, as long as we are trying to deliver messages that fall on deaf ears because they haven't had the experience, the education, and just the pedigree of the people who are speaking to them, we need to be worried. We absolutely need to be worried because we are talking to people, young people and a little bit older. They are doing 15 or 30-second clips on Instagram. That's how their brain functions. They're not even watching sitcoms like we watch 30-minute sitcoms. They're certainly not watching hour-long dramas. 15 to 30 seconds. And they believe it, or that's what they see. That's how their brains function. And if we, or Democrats, or whomever the politician is that has policies that are going to support our agendas and that are going to protect us, if they can't speak in that language to people who they want to galvanize, we have a lot to worry about. And I feel like the Democratic Party, I'm not, assuming anyone's political affiliation, but for me, who I'm a Democrat, I don't think we figured that out yet. I really don't, and we got to figure that out quick.
Certainly, Tracy.
Yes, I just wanted to say, Ricky mentioned voter suppression laws. We're a resilient people. No matter how many obstacles, hurdles they put in front of us, we're going to cross it. They may knock us down, but we get back up. So they're going to continue to play these games. We've seen it before. It's nothing new. We had to figure out how many marbles were in a jar, all kinds of crazy stuff. So it just goes to show them, which is why they're running so scared now. They're doing so much to suppress our votes. No matter what they've done, we've always come ahead. We've always come out and showed out. And I'm so excited about what happened during this last election season. And I just hope that momentum continues because, as everyone said, we can't become complacent.
Certainly. I think it's important, Stephanie, you brought up a really good point, that we have to create that language that reconnects a generation who is, not really removed, but they haven't had a lot of experiences that would make them think that the vote is important and or life-changing, as it is with some of us who are more experienced or have seen things happen in our lives. And I think that if votes were called likes and follows, if we had hashtags, it probably would be more accessible. Maybe we need to create viral videos for our candidates instead. So that's a conversation to be had. But I want to touch on this before we leave. It is Pride Month, and everyone who is under the umbrella celebrate however it is that you celebrate and be proud of who you are. But in New York, recently, the New York Pride Parade said they are banning the police from being a part of the parade, which was surprising to me because I do with this on a, regularly. And in news reports, I've always seen that the New York police have really been vigilant in making sure that they were visible, a part of the community, a part of the Pride parades. We're seen as allies. I don't know what goes on in New York because I don't live there, but it always seemed to be visually connected. So it was surprising when the Pride Parade said that they did not want the police to be a part of that. I see you already on it, Jermaine. Who they did not want them to be a part of it. They wanted, one of the spokespersons for the police department, Detective Sophia Mason, said it's really disheartening. They really do a lot of work to ensure that it's safe and an enjoyable Pride season, and it's been increasingly embraced by the people on the staff in the NYPD. So Jermaine, I guess you already got a formulated opinion. Go ahead. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I actually don't have an opinion yet, but I just wanted to share that that's also happening in our community here in Charlotte, with our traditional pride, not with Black pride. So Black pride has not had that stance because we could not come to a consensus on our board about that. And I'm not sure what the motive is for New York pride, but with the traditional pride here in Charlotte, it's a form of protest. They sent a list of demands, a list of things, mostly centered around the treatment of transgenders, many of the things that we've been talking about. There's plenty of cells in the jail, so creating a section for transgender and non-binary and non-gender conforming folk is not a big deal. It's an easy fix. And just addressing some of the mistreatment and mishandling, misgendering, dead naming, and all the things that we've talked about early on in the conversation of trans-identified folk in our community. And so far, they've gotten absolutely no response from the police or the sheriff's department here at all. So I think it's a smart strategy because it brought a lot of light and elevation to those disparities for our community. But so far, they've really actually ignored the demands. But for myself, of course, as a Black man, I've been mishandled and mistreated by the police. But also as a Black man in domestic violence situations, in situations where I was being assaulted because of my sexuality, I called the police and the police were there to support me. So I've had a duality of experience with the police that led me to know that, the system is corrupt and the system was not created for us. Police were literally created to round up slaves, right? So the system was not created for us, but, I stand with about 85% of African Americans who, when polled, say they want police. They just want more, they want equity, they want equality and lack of discrimination. And they want police to undergo psychological evaluations every quarter, and they want police, particularly police who are in beats where there's more crime, to maybe kind of have a rotation and send them over to that neighborhood for about 6 months where there's no crime, and then send them back to a more challenged neighborhood where they're not worn out. A similar rotation that we see in kind of social work fields. But I want police. I think there is value in having a law enforcement system, but there is value in having a law enforcement system that works for everybody and is actually enforcing the laws and not abusing the laws. So I don't have an opinion yet, but I like what the Charlotte Pride organization is doing in holding our police department accountable.
No, Mr. King, I'm glad that I'm seeing you up on the screen because this is a great opportunity for you. You're in a unique position where you are a liaison for the LGBT community, but African American at the same time. And it's completely different here in Atlanta. It seems that our community is comfortable with the presence of police at our prides. What do you say when you hear the opinions of Jermaine and other people like him in our communities who want to see change? They want the presence, but they want to see the change at the same time. How do we have that conversation, or what is the conversation that you're having?
So one, I can't tell, or nobody should tell anybody how to protest. So if that's what they feel is necessary to bring awareness, then by all means, then make that happen. Personally, I feel like now I have to choose if I'm going to be gay, Black, or the police in order to show up to something. But I would not hold it against any pride who decided to not want this mechanism or institution that I represent. I also feel that I took this job, one, because I wanted to get out of Michigan, but it ended up becoming a career and a passion because I wanted to be the change or be the person that you were happy to see, or you don't have a problem calling, feeling a connection to the police department. Also, going back to like what Tori said, in regards to politics, everybody who looks like you is not for you. And everybody who doesn't look like you is not against you. And that is kind of like where we are right now, is trying to figure out who's going to show up for you and who's not. So I think that if there is going to be this statement where they don't want to have Atlanta police or any representation from the police department walking the parade, I feel like there should be a statement along with that. This is the reason why we're doing that. Mm-hmm. So that, you know, also we're not perfect. And so if this is the reason why we're doing that, okay, let's see what we're doing, what we can do to get back to there, because I know I enjoy it. People enjoy seeing us, that dynamic there. And it's gotten us to where we are to have a relationship with the community.
I want to ask you about that statement, and it's unique in the position that you're in, because when you do show up, you are all three of those that you mentioned: Black, gay, and a police officer. But does that put you in an uncomfortable position at times? Does it change the color of the conversation, the construct of the conversation, the interaction, when you have to make the conscious decision of how you're showing up at any given time?
So quick 30-second story. There was a protest last year or something. Most of the time I wear a rainbow pin, always. It is like Tori or somebody else said, put in your pronouns, right? If I show up and I have a rainbow pin on, certain people always gravitate to me. So we were escorting some people walking, and saw my pin. I started getting cussed out. You can wear a pin, but you can't wear a Black Lives Matter pin. Then the F words came out, and I was like, oh, alrighty then. And so it just, I have learned that all of those things are attacking what I'm wearing, right? This institution. Don't get me wrong. I felt every word I felt, but I think that's why I have friends who I talk to, who help me realize that I am bigger than whatever names they're identifying me as, calling me XYZ. So it is tough. Also, that people think that because I am a Black man in uniform, that I am absolved of interactions with different police departments. I'm just as afraid when I go to Coweta County or anywhere else driving. And so just trying to listen to people, have conversations about certain things and how they can help change the situations. Like one of the other things that I always implore people to do is, if you have a bad altercation or altercation with the police or something, there is a checks and balances. We always implore people. There's Office of Professional Standards, there's Citizens Review Board, at least here in Atlanta. Like Tracy has said we get called about, and they actually investigate certain officers. And so I think that is the bigger picture for people to just get more involved and feel like they can be involved and challenge different institutions to hear them.
Very, very good. Very insightful. Thank you so much. I think you being in the position that you are makes it so unique. And hearing that, I was like, wow, that was a reality moment. Just hearing that I guess duality, if you will, triad that you have to deal with when being in your position. Now, Tracy, you had your hand up. Jermaine, I see you, and Ricky, I'll let you take us out as we get ready to go. But Tracy, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up with Officer King. Yeah, I was appointed previously by former Mayor Kasim Reed to sit on the Atlanta Citizen Review Board for my first term, and then I was recently reappointed by Mayor Keisha Lance-Bottoms, a mayor named Keisha, once more to serve a second term on the Citizen Review Board, which is the oversight board that community members are able to write a complaint against an officer, correctional officer. In the Citizen Review Board, we review those cases. We make suggestions to the mayor and the chief as repercussions for the actions. So I'm very happy to be a part of that. And just in my own personal opinion, I think no cops at Pride sends the wrong message. I think it's also divisive. And I hope that Atlanta doesn't adopt that stance. I think if we have an issue with each other, it's important for us to come together and to show unity. So I think that's something that I hope we don't adopt here.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly. One last question, Tracy or Pam or any one of you that are in the advisory committees with Mayor Bottoms. I know that she has made the determination that she's not going to run again. How do you think that is going to change how the advisory board moves forward with a new mayor, new leadership?
I'll let someone else answer that, and then I'll follow up.
Certainly.
I'll start it. So that's what we're trying to do now. We're trying to really, what I would say, make the board essential and a part of the way we do business and the office permanent. A simple word is codify, but that's just like Stephanie said, that's too intellectual. Basically, we're going to make the board permanent regardless of the mayor. And so this entire rest of the year, that's what we're working on doing, so that it doesn't matter who comes into the seat. It will always have, if you think about it, it will always have the heritage of the start of the inaugural of a mayor named Keisha. There's no doubt about it. But we want to make sure that she's not the last mayor that has this board. So that is the work of the board over the next few months ahead of us. It is all we're thinking about. It's all we're working on. We already, my co-chair, Matt, on behalf of the board, we've submitted a memo. She knows that's coming. And so our effort is that we get it instituted inside of the city council so that it is an official office of affairs for the mayor, and whoever the mayor is gets to come in and have a board that can consult them to make it safe for the visitors, the workers, and the lives of the community of LGBTQ plus.
Is there any way we in the community need to be involved? Is there, do we need to call? Do we need to send in letters? Do we need to do any of that to make sure that that happens?
You have an engaged mayor. So on that front, you don't have a worry there, but it's always good, especially as the change of office happens. That's when the calls have to come, that this is important. This has to be a mainstay of the city of Atlanta. This is so beneficial. So, you have a mayor who's engaged, who believes in creating safety. It's just holding each mayor who comes into office accountable to do the same. And so be ever vigilant. Like I always say, be ever vigilant on that. And when you don't see it happening, then you raise your voice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. First of all, I want to start by saying thank you each and every. This has been a great conversation. My first time ever moderating anything like this, and I tell you, my underarms are sweating profusely. But I thank you all for being as active in this conversation. All of our participants, Tracy McDaniel, Tori Cooper, Malcolm Reed, Pamela Stewart, Jay Meggs, Erica King, and Jermaine Nakia Lee. Thank you so very much for being a part of this. Ricky, I'll let you go ahead and take us out.
I was watching the clock, and I wanted us to be mindful that we had some questions in the chat. So if you guys would not mind that we knock those questions out of the chat, because I don't want our community to feel like we slighted them. So if you guys won't mind that we just go over a little bit of time to get to a couple of these questions out of the chat box, and we'll be on out the door.
That'd be great.
So one of our questions, Pamela Stewart said she would be more than happy to help us with answering that one. And it is, what is the national process for organizational corrections to establish a cohesive strategic to address our issues? Black Lives Matter is hardened, I can't speak, forgive me, some footholds within some elements of our community, not seeing this level within the LGBTQ population.
Yeah, they're there. I kind of referenced it earlier. There is a coalition of all of these organizations that take place. What's really important is that you air any concerns locally, because most of those organizations are connected to Georgia Equality, for instance, particularly if it's policy or legislative related. You have Land Illegal as well. You have Human Rights Campaign locally and nationally. If you go into the media side, you have GLAAD. If you go into youth suicide prevention, you have Trevor Project. But the easiest way, the one-stop shop, is to look locally, and Georgia Equality can start to funnel those, or allocate those notes and messages to those organizations. But I will tell you that the coalition is happening already actively. They meet regularly. They talk. The leaders of all of those organizations talk regularly. And as I shared with most of you, the Equality Act is the #1 agenda item, because that can change all of the lives of Americans across the board. But there is, from a Black Lives Matter versus what we're doing in the community, every single LGBTQ plus organization has their lane, their voice, but they do come together as one. And like I said, if you see something happening, reach out to Georgia Equality. Would be a great first stop, or your local human rights campaign if it's legislative in nature. If you're not seeing your stories represented, it would be GLAAD. If you're not, it's happening, but the stamp and the lanes are different, and we all come together with the same essence of getting the Equality Act passed.
Yes.
Malcolm
wanted to add to that one, I believe.
Yeah, and so if it's HIV related, the USPL HIV caucus, the US People Living with HIV caucus, I happen to be the federal policy chair. And if it's anything federal policy related, HIV related, or human rights, at the last AIDS Watch, we put out a pretty comprehensive policy brief that we are working for. But we are also in the process of working with states, because I work with Eric over at Georgia Equality on the Georgia Justice Coalition as well. So we're also working with local jurisdictions to try to make sure that we have some cohesive policy between state, city, federal government, Ryan White, and all of that. So if you want to look up the USPL HIV caucus on Facebook, or just on our website, and you have any issues regarding HIV, or you can reach me at malcolm@thrivess.org. Thanks.
All right, Ricky, Amber, what is our next question?
That was the only question that we had. The other ones, Eric King was so polite as to answer those while we were going through the event. So I thank him for that. Thank you very much. But that was our only question that we did have.
Awesome.
I did have another question. When you talk about, Pam, you were talking about the advisory board and everything else, with Atlanta being in a cluster of different municipalities, I live in Decatur, is there any type of reciprocal agreements, any type of partnership with the surrounding municipalities and counties?
Well, we're influenced. It's not just yes is the answer. We're also influencing other states. So our director liaison, Malik Brown, is working with other states to build similar boards so that other cities and states can be just as safe for the community. And we're transporting our best practices. We develop our bylaws. We're transporting all of that and working with the cities to help build that through the liaisons work. But yes is the answer, and we're influencing it. But our governance is essentially with the metropolitan area of Atlanta. But we do know that the mayor's name has a lot of influence and weight on, particularly in the area of building equality and one voice across the city.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I must say that to Eric, I want to personally thank you. Eric and I go back a long ways. So I was there when the first LGBT liaison came on the scene, him and his partner, Brian, at that particular time. Our relationship with Eric in the police department has grown into a love affair. So this city in the LGBTQIA community happens to embrace our police in a different way. We have become, it took a minute for them to understand that he wasn't on a spy mission. He wasn't coming to your meetings to get tidbits to come back and report to the city about what we're planning to do or what we're going to do. It wasn't that was not his mission. His mission has been to support us and to help that communication piece between the police and our community. And so therefore, I can say from the In the Life Atlanta board of directors that if any type of policy should come up for the parade, is this no police, we're going to march in solidarity with our brothers. We're going to represent that unit because they don't understand it's because of that unit has got a whole lot of our brothers and sisters out of trouble. And that is the important piece that we can embrace and like, that other cities don't experience that. We have elevated over that brutality piece into a recognizing piece. So march on, my brothers and your sisters. Know that we stand behind y'all and we lift you up. And I need to close out this segment of our conversation and thank all of my friends who answered my call to say, yes, I'll sit with you. I'll tell you my feelings. I'll tell you the conversations that we need to have because that's important to us. I love for my brothers and sisters to get together and talk about what's going on. See, so you're in a safe space to say whatever you need to say, and nobody will think differently of you. You've educated everyone around the table on what needs to be done, what has to be done. And so we reach down to North and South Carolina because that's important to us. They're our neighbors. They travel here to Pride. They take stuff back with them from Pride. So that's my brother in another city that we support them in any way they need for us to support them and show out with them. So we stand with them. So you understand that the racism runs deep in the South, and we are that bridge to keep our people together. So my friends, I can't wait to be able to hug y'all and embrace you. And I miss you tremendously. So thank you, thank you, thank you. My birthday is June 13th.
We will be celebrating it.
Yes, we are going to be over at the Star Theater over at Ralph McGill Boulevard. I'm hosting a sip and paint. It's an erotic sip and paint. So yes, y'all come and enjoy my brothers and my sisters for my birthday. Okay.
All Geminis welcome.
All Geminis welcome.
Hey.
Hey. So let's turn it up and turn it out. Amber, back in your hands, my sister.
Thank you. I just want to say amazing, amazing. Each and every one of you moderators, panelists, thank you. Thank you so much for giving us your knowledge, empowering us, educating us. I appreciate you all. And those who have been watching this, take this conversation to your friends. This doesn't stop just because we end this meeting today. It will continue as long as you all keep talking about this. And I will say this, in the Life Atlanta Foundation, this conversation that they're having today will also be another conversation, continuation, which is their town hall meeting, which is during Atlanta Black Pride in September. So definitely, if you like this, you know it's going to be even better because we are getting the opportunity to be face to face, guys. We'll be able to love on each other when we see each other Labor Day weekend. I just tell everybody, like I said, amazing. Thank you all for being on our panel. Thank you, moderators. Thank you in the Life Atlanta Foundation, and thank all of you who are able to be on, who are able to watch this. If you like the politic part of it, Monday, we're doing Black LGBTQ+ and political power. It's an excellent one to also stem from this conversation. So a lot of what you're hearing tonight, you will be building on those topics throughout the month of June. So welcome to Pride Month, guys. Atlanta Black Pride style. I appreciate you all, and you all have an awesome night. Thank you.
Bye.
Everybody, stay
Good night.
safe.
Yes.
Goodbye, everybody.
So
Take
we
care,
see you
everybody.
again.